A surprising development overnight in the murders of four Idaho college students, a development that has infuriated at least one victim's family. The man charged with their murders, Brian Kohberger, agreed to plead guilty in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Now, if this is approved by the judge, the deal would mean life in prison for Kohberger, and we would waive his right to appeal. This comes just a month before the trial was set to begin after more than 2 years of delays. With us now, CNN anchor Jim Sciutto, who spoke with one of the victims' families. Jim, what did you hear?
Listen, I've been talking to Steve Gonsalves, father of Kaylee Gonsalves, one of the four victims. She was 21 when she was murdered, for months since this happened, and I spoke to him at length last night. To be clear, this is not a deal that the families want. They're extremely upset about this. They wanted their day in court, and to be clear, they wanted the possibility of the death penalty for Brian Kohberger. And they feel that taking that off the table, right, the details of the plea agreement are such that he'll plead guilty to 4 murders but face life in prison and the death penalty will be taken off the table. They feel that taking that off the table denies them justice. In so many words. He said that to me repeatedly. And they feel blindsided. They feel that the deal was made without their consent and rushed as well. I mean, they've got to appear on July 2nd, tomorrow. They got to fly down to Boise. And he was even saying to me that he's got to buy last minute tickets for his family to go to court in Boise tomorrow for this deal. And they feel blindsided by the result of it, but also that they're being dragged in, the sense that this is being rushed through by prosecutors in a negotiation with the defense that the families weren't a party to and didn't support. And he told me that 3 out of the 4 families are very much opposed to this and made that clear to prosecutors when they were speaking with them last week.
They said blindsided. So there's no requirement that the families are consulted beforehand, but they had no idea that this was taking place?
No. And you would think, listen, you're a prosecutor. You've been connected with these families for the last 2.5 years, right? You've been in their most vulnerable moments as they go through what has already been, listen, the event itself, gutting, but the whole process has been frustrating for them, right? Because there have been a number of delays along the way. And they already felt like this was being dragged out. So then they feel they're on the brink of finally getting their day in court, and they feel like with this deal, the rug's been pulled out from under them, right? And to your point, right, prosecutors do not have to get the consent of victims for a plea agreement. The prosecutor wants to put someone in prison, and let's be clear. Under this deal, he's going to go to jail for the rest of his life. And they have caught the killer, right? Which was not clear in the days and weeks that immediately followed this. But for the family, they're just heartbroken. And listen, you or I or anybody who lost their children would be heartbroken under any circumstances. But they just feel the system didn't serve them and then didn't keep them informed along the way. And it's interesting. Steve Gonsalves told me that, typically, family members will appear in court on the day and have their say, right? Victim impact statements, et cetera. He said to me, he's not going to court, right? He's going to talk outside the court to make it clear that he's not a part of this, does not support this outcome.
That is interesting because they would get a victim impact statement during sentencing there. He's choosing to speak out of court. Jim Sciutto, what a tragedy for this family overall the last several years, and how much pain they must still be going through. Thank you so much.
Breaking overnight, a stunning turn, a plea deal in the murders of 4 University of Idaho students stabbed to death in their off-campus house nearly 3 years ago. Brian Kohberger, the man charged with killing them, has agreed to plead guilty to 4 counts of murder. In exchange, prosecutors will not pursue the death penalty against Kohberger. He was scheduled to go on trial next month after multiple delays. The families, though, learned about the deal through a letter from the prosecutor. In it, he said in part, "This resolution is our sincere attempt to seek justice for your family." But this morning, at least one of the victims' families is outraged, calling the plea deal a secretive and hurried effort to close the case without any input from them. Joining us now is CNN's Jean Casarez. Jean, first of all, to hear that from a family in this case really is stunning. How unusual is it that a prosecutor would send a letter as opposed to having a conversation with the families?
Well, we know that the families are never the last say. They don't make the final determination, but the consultation, the one-on-one discussion is paramount under states' victim impact and victim laws that they have. And this family apparently was not given a lot of notice. And this trial is weeks away. Everything was set, Sarah. And the prosecution's case was very strong. They showed that Bryan Kohberger on his Amazon account had purchased a Ka-Bar knife months before these killings took place. It was delivered. A Ka-Bar knife sheath was found close to the body of Maddie Mogen. Single source male DNA, statistical match to Bryan Kohberger. He had lost many of the defenses he wanted. No alibi. He couldn't bring that in. He didn't have another possible conspirator or someone that committed this crime. Well, the prosecution did send the letter to the families, and here's an excerpt of what that letter said. It said, "This resolution is our sincere attempt to seek justice for your family. This agreement ensures that the defendant will be convicted, will spend the rest of his life in prison, and will not be able to put you and the other families through the uncertainty of decades of post-conviction appeals." But the Goncalves family has spoken out, and they are furious.
I ask your audience if anybody knows Judge Hippler, reach out to him and ask him to put his foot down and not accept this offer. It doesn't reflect anything in Idaho. This is not justice. We had an outsider come to our community, kill our kids in their sleep while they're getting a college education, doing everything that they should do, and we don't have the courage to hold him accountable. No plea deal. Let's go for this guy. 100%. Let's do it. And that's how this family stands.
That was News Nation. And what Mr. Goncalves is saying is that the judge has to accept the plea deal. That hearing is scheduled at this point for tomorrow, and we will see what the judge says and what the judge does. You know, Sarah, when I was in law school, and I bet your husband too, we were taught that the death penalty was not a bargaining tool. You don't bargain with the death penalty, the ultimate punishment. But that is being done in this day and age. That is what they are doing, and that is what was done here. They say to save the expense of the money also, because Moscow, Latah County would pay for all of it, and it will be expensive. However, the families deserve justice.
Yeah, it's hard to see the families and how they're reacting to this. Thank you so much. That was really a surprise, apparently to the families as well, this last-minute plea deal. Yeah. Appreciate all your reporting on this. You have been there through the beginning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Joining us right now is defense attorney and former federal prosecutor Shan Wu. It's good to see you, Shan. What do you think of this plea deal, what we know of it?
Well, it seems a little bit surprising to me that the families look like they were somewhat taken by surprise. I mean, there is a crime victims manual for the state, similar to the federal one, that says that although the family victims, victims of the family, don't have the final say over a plea deal, they are to be consulted, and they're certainly meant to be kept informed. Sounds like that may not have happened here, so that's some concern. Unfortunately, it doesn't give them any right to actually intervene in the case, but something seems a little bit amiss there. And having actually tried a life without parole case, I can tell you that's a very grim, very harsh punishment when that happens, and so he's certainly going to be facing very harsh punishment. But one does have to wonder, why did they decide not to seek the death penalty?
Right. Add to the questions on that. Is the plea deal a statement of the strength or weakness of the state's case against Kohberger?
It can be, but usually, and I'm speculating, of course, I don't know what they're looking at on the inside. Usually it's the sort of hesitancy of prosecutors that if they can get something for sure and not have to worry about going to trial, they'd rather have that certainty. However, looking at this from the outside, their case seems very strong, didn't really seem to be any good defenses, and therefore you have to wonder, why being so cautious about this. I'm personally opposed to the death penalty. I don't think the state should be in the business of killing its citizens, but it's on the books there. And so the evidence here certainly seems like it's strong enough to support it. And obviously the facts are very heinous. So it does lead me to wonder, is there some problem in the case, or are they just, being cautious here?
So the hearing happens tomorrow in Boise about all this. Is there any question left? Can the judge say no?
Theoretically, the judge might not accept the plea, but it'd be very rare to do it in the sense that the judge thinks, oh, this is not a tough enough potential sentence for the defendant. The only way that usually the plea gets tanked is if there's some question as to whether the defendant's really A, competent to understand they're accepting guilt, or B, that they're kind of fudging on it, like I'm going to plead guilty because the evidence is against me, but I didn't really do it. So most likely it'll go down unless there's a problem as the judge asks the defendant questions. The judge thinks, oh, there's something wrong here. He doesn't really understand this, or he's not really admitting responsibility.
It's great to see you, Shan. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, as always.